It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it is time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on the third Aespa member for the Aespa Collab, æ-GISELLE. We'll be talking about the fourth one, I believe, next week. Apologies again for the lack of uploads recently. I have been very sick. This is one of the longest times in my life I have been sick. I've been sick now for about 8 or 9 days, several doctor's visits, so on and so forth. So, I'm feeling a lot better now than I was in the past, so hopefully you'll continue to be patient with me. I should be able to be doing the balance adjustment preview on Friday. The new medicine that I'm on definitely helps. I'm definitely feeling significantly better than I was a week ago today. But we're here to talk about Giselle, my 2 cents on her, builds, skills, where I think she's going to be used, things of that nature. The things you've come to expect from me when I do these First Thoughts and Initial Impressions videos. So, with everything out of the way, let's jump into our S3.
You're tripping! If you thought I'd go easy on you. Hi guys, I'm æ-GISELLE. Whatever language you speak, I'm sure we can be great friends.
As with the previous 2 Aespa Collab members, æ-GISELLE's voice actress is uncredited in this video, although you will be able to view it in-game under voices and expressions. Moving on to her actual stats, she is an Earth Mage of the Scorpio zodiac symbol. Just like the other 2 Aespa Collab members, her stat line is unique to her. Taking a look at those stats, she has 1,286 attack, 4,733 health, 103 speed, 652 defense, 27% critical hit chance, 160% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance, and no starting effectiveness or effect resistance. Imprint release is attack percentage for 2 members on the team, and concentration is attack percentage for herself. The imprint concentration, along with the incredibly high starting base attack, starting critical hit chance, and starting critical hit damage, should suggest that Giselle is a damage dealer. That's what she is first and foremost. Her stats, for the most part, other than her offensive ones, aren't really that great. 103 speed is pretty slow. Health at 4,733 is also quite bad, but she's a mage. All mages usually have terrible health. And 652 defense is actually pretty solid. But again, this is a mage, so 652 defense for a mage is basically average at this point. So yeah, Giselle absolutely built to be a glass cannon DPS. And when we take a look at her skills, that should also be pretty apparent that that's going to end up being her role. So first up, we're going to talk about her S3, which is Frame of Light. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. Attacks the enemy with light before increasing the attack of Giselle and the ally with the highest attack except for Giselle for 2 turns. When the enemy is not an elite or boss monster, damage sharing effects are ignored. When the enemy is defeated by this attack, it grants an extra turn to Giselle. The preview video that they show us shows that Frame of Light is a really, really strong move. It one-shots a Shu when they actually use it, and Shu is not exactly the squishiest character. She usually has about 24 to 25 KHP with around like 1250 or higher defense. Some of the really good ones have around 1400 defense. So this move, at least as of the video, looks like it hits for not nothing. It hits for some very serious damage. That said, before I go on with this review, it's really important that you temper expectations with any damage that is shown in a spotlight. It is meant to highlight the character and make the character seem as good as possible. If you look at Arunka's preview, her S3 was monstrously good in that preview. And when we got her on live, many players were disappointed because her damage nowhere lived up to what they saw in the actual preview. So going forward, I want to make that known that until we see the damage multipliers, you take everything you see in Smilegate's official video for Giselle with a grain of salt. Frame of Light could hit like a wet noodle, and you just would never know until you actually pulled the character. So again, temper those expectations. That said, let's break down the other parts of the move. Any attack that gives an attack buff is always going to be good, especially since it gives it to the second highest attack member on your team that's not Giselle here. So, for example, if you have like Giselle and another DPS on your team, say like maybe Melissa, for example, then, both of them are going to get an attack buff from Frame of Light. I would have liked it if she got the attack before, but then I guess that would mean that she'd have to take a penalty on the damage multiplier. If you want the attack actually before you use Frame of Light, the attack buff, you're going to want to pair her with æ-GISELLE. I think that's on purpose. They use her a lot in the video. It is definitely, those two synergize extremely well together. You use æ-GISELLE to push up Giselle for reasons that we'll talk about with the S2 and give her the attack buff. So anytime a character gives attack buff, it's definitely something to take note of. It is, historically speaking, the most impactful buff in PvP for Epic 7, so that's always very good. Speaking of things that are traditionally very good, damage sharing effects are ignored is on this move. That is also, again, something that is traditionally very good. You look at Green Pobble, he is pretty much the poster child for this mechanic. His S3 absolutely annihilates people the way that he's actually played. If you played against a really good one, you've probably seen him just like kill things like tanks or Apocalypse Robbies in one hit. That's obviously very, very strong. In a more recent unit releases, Edward Elric is another character that is very strong with the damage sharing effects are ignored portion on his S3. Granted, that's a bit of a rockier comparison considering the character was released in a state that was far below people's expectations, eventually was hotfixed, and even though his S3 wasn't changed, time has kind of proven that Edward is an incredibly strong unit and his S3 is actually pretty powerful. Coming back around to the last part of the move, granting an extra turn to the caster whenever she actually secures a kill. This to me is very indicative of modern mage design. Characters like Spectre Tenebria, Melissa, Roy, Mustang. These characters are all in a very similar boat where they do a combo that kills a thing, takes an extra turn, and just does more damage. This one is a bit less toxic in my opinion than something like Spectre Tenebria or Roy Mustang, because when those things actually go off because they've stacked like 8,000 books, there's nothing you can really do about it. The counterplay to just starting the game with 60 souls, at least to me, is nowhere near good enough because all the people that are abusing that, they're just going to ban Bellion. So if I was going to have a burst mage that was going to be taking extra turns, I would rather it be a conditional like this one and not have a soul burn that grants an extra turn. So again, this move here really does cement the playstyle of the character. She's just an aggressive mage that is trying to kill people much in the same way that your Roys, your Melissas, and your Spectres are doing. This is definitely going to be a glass cannon DPS for sure. And when we take a look at the S2 in a second, it should be pretty apparent about how you're going to end up actually building her. Moving on to the S2, it is a passive skill, Linguistic Wisdom. Amplifies the effect of combat readiness, increases the caster receives by 50%, and at the start of the turn has a 70 to 100% chance to dispel one debuff depending on Malagora. So, the increase to combat readiness pushes says to me that you're going to want to play this character dirt slow, very similar to how we used to build Judge Kisei style cleave characters in the past. Very slow, destruction set with as much damage as possible. Destruction penetration seems very good to me, along with having, say, like maybe attack percentage boots, attack percentage ring, and either crit damage or crit chance necklace. That to me sounds like the way you'd want to play it, and I am inclined to feel like the combat trials in the video are also on board with this as well, because Giselle is by far the slowest character in all of these exhibition matches that they show. She's even slower than Shu, who traditionally is built between 160 and 175 speed. So if she's even slower than Shu, then yeah, I think that this character is going to be built not quite base speed, but in a very similar way to how you build Commander Pavel, like 150 speed or so if you can get it. So I think that's where people are trying to actually, or at least where I think you probably are going to want to end up with this character stat-wise, but you're definitely going to want to pair this character with characters like your Flans, your auxiliary lots, and things like that. Even Ning Ning. This character just feels like she was built to go with æ-Ning Ning for sure. Those are the kinds of characters I think you're going to want to bring Giselle with. You could, in theory, play this character on speed set, although I just don't know if it will actually work out. We have to, again, see the multipliers. The character is very dependent on getting a kill with Frame of Light, so it stands to reason that if you were going to be playing her, you want a ton of damage on her. And considering the way that most mages of her type are played, like your Roy Mustangs and your Melissas, those kinds of characters are usually built to the gills with damage, and they usually have a supporting cast. If you are drafting Giselle, it feels like it's because the entire team is geared towards making Giselle work. So, the other part of the passive here, the Dispel 1 debuff, I don't foresee this being super amazing in PvP. It might get rid of a blind every once in a while, maybe a lucky stun, things like that. But most of the moves that actually would debuff Giselle, there's a high chance that they also just kill her outright. She's an incredibly squishy character with no way to actually survive. So Linguistic Wisdom's Dispel debuff doesn't seem super good for PvP, at least to me. Where I think it really shines, though, is in Nightmare Labyrinth. If you have tried that at all, you'll probably know about Juleeve Council. Juleeve Council rewards you for playing a full green team and really wants a lot of ways to dispel debuffs on your team. So I think Giselle, alongside Zahak and Destina and maybe like a Rowana or something, is a fairly powerful PvE team. So for you PvE players, if you have not cleared Nightmare Labyrinth, if you're looking for a character for Nightmare Labyrinth, I do think that Giselle could be a fairly good option because of the fact that she has this built-in wondrous potion vial that could very much help her and help your team with the venom buffs that Juleeve Council Nightmare actually uses. The last skill to talk about is her basic skill, which is Surging Light. Attacks the enemy and increases the combat readiness of the ally with the highest attack, except for Giselle, by 10 to 15% based on Malagora. Damage dealt increases proportional to the target's current health ratio, and then you can soul burn it to increase the damage dealt. So this is obviously a move where we need to see the damage multipliers because we just don't know what the damage is going to be, what the ratio is. There's always going to be a sweet spot. A character like Straze, if you watch how to play Straze, around like 3,800 or 3,850 is the sweet spot where you're going to be getting the max penetration. What is the sweet spot, the current health ratio, where it's going to kill? There's probably like 40% or 35%, assuming you have decent, respectable damage, is probably the sweet spot where it ends up killing a character instantaneously. Again, just don't know. Have to wait on the multiplier. I think the most interesting thing about this move is that it does have a CR push component built into it, and it's for a character other than Giselle. It is very akin to like a Mediator Kowarik. So to me, a fun meme build to try might end up actually being Counter Unity Giselle, because based on the multipliers of the move, maybe the move is done in such a way where even if you have very low damage, it's like an instant kill at like 30 or 35%. Perhaps playing a Counter Unity one where you're just trying to get a lucky counter and kill somebody outright when they're low on health could be pretty good. The problem that I have is that Giselle's base HP is just absolutely abysmal, and her HP, her defense is just average. So it might be possible. It's probably not the right build. It's probably not going to be super good, but mages in the past, such as, say, Archdemon Shadow, have been able to kind of have a build where they're on counter and they are supremely tanky and you can get some value out of it. So again, wait to see the multipliers. Counter Giselle might be a possibility. It might be something that's on the table. And even if she is not, this one could still be Destruction Unity or even like Speed Unity. Those could also be potential builds as well, just because anytime there is an S1 that has a CR component built into it for a character other than the caster, it can steal games for sure in the right scenario. So I wouldn't write it off entirely for sure. Again, wait to see the damage multipliers on Surging Light, but do keep a pin in that. Do keep that in the back of your mind. Overall, I think that Giselle is not necessarily the weakest of the three Aespa Collab members that we have seen, but she is definitely, I think, the least unique. She reminds me of what I used to say about Spectre Tenebria, The character may be top tier. The character may be an extremely powerful damage dealer, but at the end of the day, they are just a damage dealer. The most important things are the utility characters, the characters that do things that no one else does. Winter is a character that has a 2-turn repeatable stun along with true damage. There are no other characters outside of Wanda in the game with a 2-turn stun, and Winter massively outdamages and outspeeds Wanda. So there's not really any character like her. A character like Ning Ning is very akin to Desert Jewel Basar. Yes, Desert Jewel Basar and Ning Ning both have barrier inversions, but Ning Ning is the only barrier inversion character that also can provide you with an attack buff. Barrier inversion seems to be a very strong and at times necessary mechanic, and if you don't have Desert Jewel Basar, if you do not have access to that Moonlight 5-star, you didn't get lucky and pull them, Ning Ning is your only way to get that very, very powerful effect in the current meta. So you're going to want to have access to her. Again, Giselle is just a burst mage, at least on paper. So characters like your Roy Mustangs, your Ludwigs, your Spectres, your Melissas, they can all absolutely destroy a team by themselves. Even a character like Commander Pavel, if you're fortunate enough to have him, can also just destroy an entire team by themselves. There's no shortage of incredibly aggressive damage dealers in Epic 7. So it's for that reason that I'm not too keen on Giselle. I'm still going to pull for her because she's a limited unit. You should always pull for every limited unit. But to me, she is the least exciting of the 3 Aespa Collab members, at least from a gameplay standpoint. She's just a damage dealer at the end of the day. Damage dealers come and go. If you look back throughout the history of Epic 7, characters like Luna, for example, were very good at one point. No longer the case. Even a character like Red Charlotte used to be very good. Red Robbie. These characters were very, very good. General power creep and newer units have since replaced them. The things that remain constant are your characters like your Disruptors, like your Fairy Tale Tenebrias, your Solitarias of the Snow, your Conqueror Liliuses, your Amelias, your Diens, those kinds of Soul Weavers. Those are usually constants. Your Knights are constants like Unbound Knight, ROL, and Fallen Cecilia. Those ones don't get replaced as often. Those are a little bit more durable because they are powerful, unique supporters that do things that no one else does. Whereas, again, damage dealers, not named Spectre Tenebrae, I should say, usually, again, come and go. And that's pretty much how I feel about Giselle. Not a bad unit for sure. On paper, definitely a strong unit. But because she is just a damage dealer and not much else, I think she is the least exciting, again, of the 3 that we've seen so far. To wrap up the video, let's talk about Giselle's artifact, which is Frame of Light. When attacking with a single attack, increases the damage dealt by 8 to 16% based on the artifact's level. When the enemy is defeated by a single attack, gain 10 souls at the start of the next turn. This effect upon defeating an enemy can only be activated once. I'm not really quite sure what to make of this one. It provides a comparable damage output to something like, say, a Symbol of Unity or Roy Mustang's Flame Gloves artifacts, and both of those are pretty solid damage options. The problem is that at the end of the day, this is a mage, and the elephant in the room is Tehagel's Ancient Book. Tehagel's Ancient Book enables so many degenerate strategies that even if your mage is not actually amazing with their soul burn, just giving your team 20 souls to start means that the other 3 members on your team probably have something on their team that's broken enough to actually use it. So it's very, very hard for me to always recommend a mage exclusive artifact over Tehagel's Ancient Book. It's gotten to the point now where I personally feel like we need to actually nerf book to restrict it to 1 per team in order to have some actual diversity in mage builds. Because at this point, again, even a character like Zio is going to be on Tehagel's Ancient Book, even though it's not super amazing for him. Just, it's too hard to understate how powerful starting the game with 20 souls is. But we can't just outright remove book at this point, because then characters like Roy Mustang and like Ludwig and other characters, they all just kind of suffer massively from not having the 20 starting souls. It's just too ingrained in the game at this point. So I really wish they would restrict it so that way I'd have an easier time recommending mage exclusive artifacts. This, to me, though, at the end of the day, feels like the in-between option for when you want your damage artifacts like your Portrait of the Saviors, but you also want your souls like Tehagel's Ancient Book. The problem is that it's a bit awkward at 10 extra souls. So it's not quite the extra 20, because most of these mages are using 20 soul burn, so it might not work out for you. This is definitely one where you're going to have to test it. Obviously, they built this in mind with the actual character, because you're going to want to use the S3, get a kill, and then get the extra 10 souls, so you could soul burn the S1 and do absolutely massive amounts of damage with the extra 16% attack that you get from this. Again, it's going to depend entirely on your playstyle, what characters you play with. Frame of Light is definitely one that is worth picking up, because there are definitely a significant lack of damage increasing artifacts for mages. And if they ever do anything about Book, you're definitely going to want to have a couple of these. Roy Mustang's artifact is definitely one of the better ones that you can play right now on mages when you don't actually want to consider Tehegel's Ancient Book. And I kind of lump this right in there with it. Definitely a good artifact on paper. Hard to recommend because of just how broken Tehegel's Ancient Book is in PvP for the most part. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Giselle. My thoughts on her artifact. If I missed anything, as always, let me know down in the comments below. Check in Friday for the balance adjustment preview. I believe we are getting one of those. I will be going through the pros and cons like I normally do with that. There will also be another holiday giveaway that I'm going to attach to that video. And if for some reason that video doesn't come out, we don't get a balance adjustment preview, then I will obviously either one, make a community post, or it will be attached to the very next video as well. Want to do something nice for my community for the holidays. So again, I will be doing another giveaway. So please look forward to that. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video, and enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I will catch you all in the next one. Later now.